Chris Duffin, The Secrets to Performance and Injury Prevention, double world record holder, author, engineer, inventor, mad scientist. In this show, I interview the legendary Chris Duffin, a double world record holder, strength athlete, inventor, and author. We explore Chris's innovative approach to strength training and injury prevention, emphasizing the importance of proper technique and biomechanics and knowledge. Chris shares his journey, including his achievements in powerlifting and his engineering background, which influences his fitness equipment designs. The conversation also covers Chris's new app, Lift Lab, which provides real-time training feedback using the most advanced technology. It's truly revolutionary and launches today. I'm excited. Chris's insights offer valuable guidance for anyone looking to optimize their training and reduce injury risks. During the show, Chris also delves into his philosophy on the best things for maintaining peak physical and mental health. He highlights the critical role of sleep, sun, movement, and nutrition in achieving optimal performance and overall well-being. Chris explains how adequate sleep is essential for recovery and cognitive function, while exposure to sunlight helps regulate circadian rhythms and boosts mood. Proper nutrition, he notes, fuels the body and supports muscle growth and repair. Additionally, Chris proudly mentions that some of his innovative fitness equipment designs have made their way into the White House and elite sports teams, underscoring the impact and recognition of his work at the highest levels. This acknowledgement serves as a testament to the effectiveness and quality of his inventions in the realm of strength training and fitness. We speak about his revolutionary Barefoot, now that's B-E-A-R, barefoot shoes, and touch on his best-selling book, The Eagle and the Dragon. Overall, this episode provides a comprehensive look at Chris Duffin's multifaceted approach to health and fitness, blending cutting-edge technology with foundational wellness principles, and I'm very excited to get started on them myself. You can find The Eagle and the Dragon at the links below, chrisduffin.com, barefoot shoes at barefoot.store, that's B-E-A-R, links are below, Chris's website, chrisduffin.com, on Insta, and this one's a good one, mad_scientist_Duffin, and his Linktree at the links below, Linktree / Chris Duffin. Thanks for watching. I'm Damien Porter, former New Zealand Special Forces operator, subject matter expert from HowNotToDieGuy.com. And you're listening to my Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast, sponsored by State, the ultimate daily formula for optimum hormone health, stress management, energy, and performance. 100% natural and clinically proven ingredients. Provides everything you need to raise your game in a convenient gut-friendly capsule. And my new sponsor, Michael Mason of the Mason Survival Protocol. Links for my former shows are in the show notes below. Thanks for watching. And we're live. Welcome to the Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast. Welcome to my guest this morning, all the way from the States, Chris Duffin.
How you doing?
Hey, man. So good to have you on. I appreciate you taking the time so quickly to come on the show. I'm intrigued. You're titled The Mad Scientist, but I've seen you through a mutual friend, John McPhee, aka the Sheriff of Baghdad, a Delta Force two-time guest and friend on the show. How did you get to talking with John? Because you're not in that world. You're a world record holder. You're a strength athlete. You're an inventor and author. And then here you go talking to one of the top operators in the world in my world, Special Forces.
Yeah, I have an incredibly diverse, I guess, Rolodex, as you would call it, because of the things that I've been involved with. I've been, in the health and fitness realm for quite some time, although my background is actually quite a bit different than that. But I work in a lot of the rehab elements, so return to play, getting people out of pain. And when you're doing that, you're you're kind of touching all over the place. Like I've designed products that are in the White House, used by the president, used in all branches of the military.
Wow.
So when we're talking, that realm, yeah. And my products are used by, every major league baseball team, as well as, 80% of the NFL, NBA, and 1,000 colleges. Yet at the same time, so I'm interacting with clinicians, then I'm been involved in the peptide space, and that's actually how I got, interestingly enough, well, maybe not. So, um, I'll tell you how I got involved with John McPhee. It's a long story,
Yeah, awesome.
but I've done a lot of work with the leading spine biomechanist in the world, Dr. Stuart McGill.
He's
And
a great guy, and he speaks so well. He doesn't speak like a scientist. He really speaks in words and in ways that we can understand.
yeah, so he's a really good friend of mine. I've lectured alongside of him, and a lot of my work is around getting out of pain on the backside. And so he has a lot of people. Again, it's just like when you work in that realm, it's like all over the place. So he was working with some celebrities, and those celebrities reached out to me after buying my products. Next thing they're using my equipment at their house, then they're buying my shoes, then they're using my supplements, and they're reaching out to me, and I'm consulting them on peptides and regeneration and prepping them for photo shoots and things like that. Turns out they're really good friends with John McPhee. It's like, hey, you really got to connect. This guy is so legit.
Yeah.
And John was in Portland. He calls me up, and I'm like, yeah, come on over. So he comes over to my house. I had him down in my basement and did a little podcast down in my shop. So
Nice.
it's funny the web of how things roll around, right?
It is. And what I love about being able to do this, Chris, connecting over the world, most people want to share their story. Most people that I have on want to help others. So the humility is there and the altruism is there. You're a big deal. I'm just some guy over here in Australia. But it's just beautiful to get out and share your story to others. And it's a great connection as well.
I'm not I'm not a big deal. I'm just a guy that does things the way that I want to, and I try to I try to impact the world in the way that I can, and that's how I ended up in this space doing the things that I was doing. I was working a corporate career, and I owned a gym on the side because I was trying to I was trying to lift a lot of weights at the time, and I just saw so much wrong, and I just started posting videos online trying to help people. I think it was in early 2000s, and it started getting people out of pain, and people were messaging me and emailing me about changing their life, and I was like, this is my calling. This is what I'm meant to do. Like, I was coaching in my corporate career because I was a turnaround executive. So that was my big thing that I loved with my work, was being able to impact the people that I work with, to
Yeah.
change culture, to change people and see them accomplish more than they thought possible. And I'm like, oh my God, like on the internet, I can do this to a greater deal, and people, like, it's already happening. And so yeah, just one day I was like, I got to quit my career.
Wow.
So
Wow. That's amazing that you've transitioned from such a job to helping people, but becoming your job. You talked about lifting a lot of weights, and you again the humility comes through in all the gifts, which is beautiful. But you're a world record holder. And I think you're actually the ninth world record holder on this show. Um, can you talk to the world record that you've got?
yeah. So I was a competitive power lifter for a long time. I've actually competed down in Australia. One while I was down there. It's actually one of my favorite powerlifting meets was down there. So I was ranked number one in the world for like 8 years straight. Is either the squat, deadlift, or what they call the total. And then I just decided I wanted to demonstrate things on my terms, and I just came up with this wild set of goals. I called it grand goals. Grand because, well, it was over the top, like doing something that nobody thought possible, like try to inspire people through putting something out there that people didn't think was possible, and also because it was 1,000 pounds.
Yeah.
And so a grand. And so my goal was to deadlift 1,000 pounds for repetitions. And I did so. I did 1,001 pounds, maybe it was 1,002, for 3 repetitions.
Wow.
And it was the Guinness World Record for the most weight ever sumo deadlifted. And regardless of body weight, whatever. At that time I did that, I think there was 6 other people who have deadlifted 1,000 pounds, but that was done in strongman events, and they weighed 380 to 440 pounds.
Yeah.
And I did mine, I was like 265, but nobody had ever done it sumo before. And so I hold the Guinness World Record for the sumo deadlift. not for doing it for reps. There's no record around that. I just wanted to show off, there's that. So no humility in that statement. And then, but I also want to be, so none of those people that have deadlifted it have also squatted 1,000 pounds. You're usually like a specialist because of your body type, your frame. Hey, you've got a shorter torso, long arms, or it's the other way around makes you a great squatter. Typically not both. So there was half a dozen maybe people that have squatted 1,000 pounds. So I came back, and 4 years later of training, came back and squatted 1,001 pounds for 3 repetitions. It was
Wow.
actually right before COVID hit. It was like 2 days. Like I was supposed to do it at this big equipment show, the URSA show. It's the biggest equipment show in the world down in San Diego. And I was going to be this exhibition there, but they shut it down that week. And so we had to change it to like this live stream event because we couldn't even, it was like, oh, now you can only have 25 people. Now you can have 5 people. So we made it live stream, and that was on a Saturday. And then Mondays when like everything shut down. So,
Wow, that was a
uh,
crazy time.
so I'm the only person that's done both. I thought, and I just wanted to me, it was like, it was to walk a walk of my methodology, which is around how to create torso stability and control and manage the spine, connection to the floor. And so, like, being able to demonstrate those in these two dichotomies showed that I've done it not as a specialist of one or the other.
I love that you've mentioned that on the end because I was going to ask you, you got freakishly strong. You're not one of these huge, strong men that do get injured in their tiny little muscles. I was going to ask you, how did you avoid injury doing such massive feats?
Yeah, that is, it comes down to a lot of what I was teaching. So
Mm.
it was this, methodology for being able to tap into, your total potential. So it's based on, so I did a lot of, so my background, by the way, is engineering. I've got a couple engineering degrees and MBA, and that's where I got into the realm of designing products later too. But
Yeah.
I, I did maybe 8 years of clinical continuing education. So some of that in the spine, like again, that's why I'm working with Dr. Craig Liebenson. And then there was a lot of work with out of the Prague School of Medicine, dynamic neuromuscular stabilization. And then I started
Oh, wow.
integrating these concepts into how we actually hold tension, how we move the body, and those are the things that were helping people get out of pain, live a better quality of life. And so it's around, but thinking about it from a performance aspect as well, because when we have instability, and the body senses, that we're unsafe, we've got, um, a downgrading of motor output. Essentially, the body's going to protective measures to try to keep us safe.
Yep.
And so sometimes we see that in limitations in mobility over time, where the body starts, sensing that a joint is at risk and starts tightening the muscles around that.
Hmm.
But we also have that same neurological inhibition. So it's around, how do I get everything turned on in the right aspect, and so how do I get the joints in the right position and get the right link, the muscle length tension relationship, so that they're performing the best and operating and controlling that joint. And then how is that systemically affecting the whole body? So when I say controlling and managing the spinal position, it comes down to this diaphragm to pelvis relationship.
Right.
Essentially just like making your rib cage, parallel to your pelvis, right?
Yep.
It's that simple. And when you do that, then learning how to descend the diaphragm sounds fancy, but it's essentially, fill out that your torso, not in a big like belly breath, but 360 degrees around all the way into the back. And how do you get into understanding how, when you're doing that properly, how do we cue it like in an easy fashion? But when we do this gives us a great place to work off of, where we create this incredible pressure and control, which then actually affects the neurological output and the big power generations of like your shoulder or hip complex can perform their job so much better. And so eh, I hope that's not getting too technical. I'm trying to keep it in fairly
Yeah.
simple terms,
Yep.
but that's how I did that. Like, I mean, in the past I've injured my back so bad that I've had to learn to walk again.
Oh,
I've been,
wow.
I had to be carried. I had a walker, I had to progress to a walker to that. I've been through that in life. But I was still able to come back and do these things. And a lot of times people think that I'm the guy with a bad back or a damaged this, and it's this thing that they carry with them, and that can be really debilitating and actually create more of the same things when you treat yourself in this fragile manner. And so it's teaching the skills around that, but then also trying to inspire as well. So that's yeah, that's long and short. I mean, yeah, I did injure myself here and there in the process because I was pushing the limits. It's pushing the edge because I was finding how does how does my process and thought process, where does it not work? What am I not doing? How do I keep pushing? So for me, my learning experience is to push those limits myself. And I'm going to break in that process, but I'm going to develop the best process, the best approach for being able to do that. And it's the same exact thing that you would use with let's say, a 65-year-old grandmother that's never lifted a weight in her life, that's in tears because she can't pick up her grandkid off the floor.
Yeah.
We're going to use and coach the exact same thing in a clinical setting there as you would as I'm walking up and trying to prep to do this 1,000-pound squat that I was a little out of position in the prior week and my back was, it's the same thing.
It totally makes sense. And that's why I wanted to get you on because your approach seems kind of unique. It seems like you've sort of rewritten the drawing board, as it were. I say that because my background before the military was exercise rehab, and back then, really the only guys in the world was Paul Check. I'm saying back then, and I almost going to
Oh,
use the word,
Paul's a friend of mine. I know Paul.
yeah, and
He's
he
gotten a
was.
little out there in frequent recent years, but
Exactly, exactly. But that's 20, 30 years ago when he was with Swiss balls and breaking that ground there with transverse abdominis training. But it's changed so much. And when you were saying there, you're filling your your core up 360 degrees, completely different than what he was doing with some success, but it just makes more sense now. And it looks like guys like
yeah.
yourself, guys like Layden Norton, Stu McGill, they're just a bit more holistic about it. Also, it's something that you can actually do rather than having to train with Paul at $1,000 a shot for many, many months. So much more clever. Um,
Yeah, they found that the activation of the TVA really just wasn't, that itself was not that big of a deal as it
no.
relates to it, right? And so I try to simplify it down. Like if I get the rib cage in the right orientation and I teach somebody, how to pressurize diaphragmatically, uh, without like over reliance on your breath. So separating those two out, usually my teaching strategy, but basically filling that big, treating that big area like a big giant balloon and filling it up all the way around. There's some, tactile points to touch, and there's tons of ways to teach this and teach it, in remedial positions and advance it to the, all the way to the standing, position, which would be the hardest. But when we do that, like all the complexity disappears because there's this co-contraction of all the outer sheath of abdominal structure, the obliques, the pelvic floor, which people used to teach with a Valsalva maneuver. Like all
Yes.
that just disappears. Like if I pressurize correctly, then all these other things just automatically happen. And so trying to simplify that down and distill it, it took me years to figure out how to do that in testing with people and figuring out how to get that verbiage down, and then how do I like connect that to the floor as well, because that's where most sports are connected. You're transferring power from the floor into some distal object. It sounds really bad, but something in your hands, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
um, so technical to simple. um, yeah, when I started doing that stuff, people said I was crazy. They're like, "Oh, that's wrong. Like you got to arch big. You got to like the strength training world was a completely different realm, and my approach was like very different. But now you walk into most any weight room or any training session in the world today, and there's going to be the culture has changed, like how we can talk about rooting or a connection to the floor, how we talk about stabilization. All of this has really changed over the last 15 years that I've been doing this, and then that's I'm proud to be part of that, and I'm proud of having that impact because it's it's transformational to many people when it comes to managing that if they're taught to do this stuff properly.
And that's not a throwaway line, Chris. It is transformational. And you talk about you being carried. I've been in such bad back pain, I had to crawl around the house. You know, that 65-year-old grandma, when she can actually physically do that, it is transformational. It's not just about, deadlifting 1,000 pounds. Those are relative to the person themselves. And to get away from pain is one of the best things. And one thing Paul Chek did get right was the avoidance of pain is actually the best motivator of man, unless you're cooked.
Yeah.
Um, Now, you've essentially reinvented the wheel, but from a great place. But also the invention side, is that what spurred you to actually having to become an inventor of things, being an engineer and making all these things that you do for strength training and exercise?
Yeah, yeah. So I did recently step away from the company where that I founded that was producing my products, the physical products. But yeah, my design concept there was realizing that the straight barbell and so many of the implements that we use force us into a really bad position or require just so much technique to try to get into position and know how to do it. And it's like to do a back squat, there's not like, yeah, every able-bodied person should be able to go through a squat type motion, but with a bar in this very specific location on your back, not necessarily so. Like everybody's levers are different, and
Yep.
that may not be the best position and may put you at a disadvantage. Plus, the huge amount of yeah, there's just so much technique that goes into it. And I found that if I put the load in the right places, and so I was the first one that started designing products that changed where the load was. And that because that load, one, it's going to get the joint in the right position, but it also has neurological impacts. So on the peripheral, so there's a lot of people like Huberman and Peter Attia and a lot of the talking about this top-down approach
Hmm.
and how the brain impacts our neurology. Well, the thing is we can actually go the other way, which is to put a something on the peripheral end that then influences the brain through what it's sensing, which then goes out and changes the neurology and what's happening.
Brilliant.
And so I found that really incredible, and that's essentially where my design philosophy. And that's why they're used so much in professional sports and colleges, and actually a lot of the military things of that nature because of the injury prevention. It takes the coaching out of it because then all of a sudden, like somebody just squats perfectly in a natural way because we've got the load in the right place, and I don't have to worry about spending all this time in a something that's really hard to transfer. How do I teach everyone to squat properly with a barbell on their back? Right.
Exactly.
I can't touch that many people. But if I put this product in their hand and it happens correctly, yay, that's a big win.
Now, I know, I don't know how I ended up as a podcast host for the last 7 years, but I know listening to this, if I was the listener, I'd be going, what is this thing you're speaking of? What is this invention? So, what is this thing that helps you squat so well?
Yeah. So that was the transformer bar was one of the products. So and that was with my company Kabuki Strength. But it's still to me when we think about being accessible, it still like limits like the movement has now become accessible by people that may be intimidated or it doesn't feel right. And so
Hmm.
now I'm on this process of trying to make it more accessible in a different manner, and
Nice.
that's through the technological innovations. So what I've done, it's actually it's launching. Beta test launches on Monday, so probably before this podcast release, I'm sure.
Yep.
But using the technology that's in our hands today, that's our phone, the advancement not just in AI, but the pixel technology and the discernment of that, we can actually dive in one understand what's happening with your nervous system and neurological output.
Wow.
I kid you not, because that is, yeah, we know about like I'm wearing an Aura ring, right? It's, got a sense of the autonomic nervous system via
Yep.
the heart rate variability. I've been playing with heart rate variability for a long time. It's a nice thing to look at, but it's what we call a lagging indicator. It tells you, hey, yesterday you
The
pushed it too
next
hard.
day.
Today,
Yeah.
take it lighter.
Yeah.
But then it doesn't know what your plan is either. So it's just kind of like, what do I do with this data? But our phones, oh, hey, I've got one right here. This pixel right here that we can achieve with a phone today can see with such detail that we can see a plate on a bar and know exactly how fast it's moving, the same as what would have been 5 years ago. You had to do in a laboratory test with lasers.
Wow.
What value is that? Well, how fast that bar is moving with what load is on it is directly tied to our neurological output.
Yep.
So I know I can see exactly what the stress of your whole life has right up to that moment and know exactly what weight should go on the bar next based
Wow.
on your training program. And I can use AI pose estimation to look at where all your joint positions are at the exact same time
Oh, that's amazing.
and then give you feedback and also what would be the movement prep drills to give you the right proprioceptive view of preparing your body and mind for that. So here's your warm up for the workout.
Yep.
Oh, well, here's the weakness that you may have. I'm not telling you, but your program will actually refine to you based on what those needs are. So instead of next week is going to adjust because what we see with the phone, your coach with bionic vision
Yep.
is seeing in your movement knows that, hey, we're going to do some more single leg work in this fashion next week because we need to get stronger in these areas to start fixing this stuff naturally. Like it's incredible. So, I mean, I've been working on this for a couple years, but the tech, we're harnessing the tech in here with the most leading scientific principles around training to a whole nother level. Well, I'm gonna back into physics for a second.
Sure.
This is a really cool discussion. So we talk about injury prevention, right?
Yep.
So one, we talked about the bar and it naturally moving it. Well, this is very accessible. You already own this. This is going to monitor that form, that technique, adjust your training, and adjust the total load, the load management, looking at your entire stress via your personal life in training, how you're responding to training, and it makes that program completely 100% tailored to you and self-learning. So it's constantly becoming the best possible program to you.
It's phenomenal.
And then so there's a lot of background calculations from something called the K value, which is it's all adaptive modulators. So we're looking at a lot of different adaptive modulators, but the one adaptive modulator I'd love to talk about is called the jerk metric. And
I watched a little bit of that video
oh, you
yesterday
did?
in
Okay.
preparation. So let's talk about the jerk metric.
Yeah. So the jerk metric it's only in theory, and I say only, it's not because we've been running it for a while. But it's also based on some of Dr. Charlie Weingroff's work as well when it comes to tissue recovery and modes of injury.
Brilliant.
So, uh, and maybe for some other people, Charlie's the one that has really gone into depth with it with me. And this was with his work with within the NBA and reducing injury rates, that hypoxic tissue. So when we start overtraining or pushing muscles too far, a certain muscle, let's say it's your calf muscle, right? Uh, what's happening is we start getting, release of enzymes and chemicals into the muscle, and how fast we clear it is, which is based on nutrition, training, blood flow, all these other factors. There's a lot of factors in this that help clear that out there. But if it doesn't clear fast enough, the tissue starts becoming hypoxic.
Right.
So basically, it's got acid built up, right? And that's when it starts maybe burning, cramping, those sorts of things happening. They've found that hypoxic tissue is that hypoxia starts developing before an injury actually happens. So when we start getting this, then that's now we've got a strained calf or a strained Achilles or something down the road. So if we can prevent hypoxia, then we can prevent before the injury happens. Well, the best way to do that is make sure that you rest 20 minutes because that's about what time it takes for all that to clear. Not
Right.
super highly effective for training, But I did do that when I was chasing my 1,000 pound squat. I rested 15 to 20 minutes between sets to make, because I was pushing the limits, right?
Wow.
I do a triple with 960 pounds and then come back and do a triple with 970 and then another one with 975. And I was waiting 15 to 20 minutes before, because everything I could do to to manage that. So where am I going with this? So how do we take that back even further? That's where it gets really interesting, and that's where the jerk metric comes in.
Right.
Because we can, before, let's say you're doing squats, for example, and a small muscle starts fatiguing out a little bit and your position starts changing. Well, we're going to see that in the app, right? But maybe we don't. Maybe it's so subtle. Those minor muscles that are starting to overwork, and those are where we start saying we've got compensatory patterns kicking in. Some sort of
Yep.
compensation is kicking in.
Yep.
As soon as those start coming in, that's where it's getting overworked. And that's where it's starting to lead to a hypoxic condition, which then is leading to an injury. But what happens? We start seeing the movement be not as smooth. And maybe not smooth that you can't see, it's very subtle. So, right now, when we talk about velocity work and tapping into the nervous system, I'd have to say this is you said humility or something earlier. You know, I'm
Yeah.
not going to be humble in here. When I started doing, I was the first one that dove into actually profiling and getting that neurological tie-in between how fast a movement is and how fast it should be for you, and that actually telling your readiness right now, and then what
Yeah.
load you can put on the bar.
That's brilliant. That
I,
small
I was a
soundbite
leader in that.
is phenomenal, Chris. If people can go back and listen to what you just said then, that is groundbreaking.
Yeah, and it's like you. So a better way to simplify. I'm going to get back to the jerk metric in just a second, but every day your readiness is at a different level. If you had a fight with your wife, or the boss yelled at you yesterday, or you've got some stress in your family, the kids' grades aren't doing good, the baby was up late and you didn't sleep well. Like, if you're a 225 bencher, you're not a 225 bencher every day, right? That's like the HRV measurement. All of this is going in. What is your readiness today? And so, if you want to, one, reduce injury, or better yet, maximize your performance, is taking advantage of where you are, because you may be a 232, a 217. It's always
Exactly.
varying around. And so, being able to take care of those micro moments and then not over push. And so, if you knew, for example, let's say you're using a standard training program, what are they going to do? They're going to go off your max and suggest a set and rep scheme. Well, if that's changing by a couple pounds every day, so with velocity based training, you literally know exactly what that max is today. All those factors compelled to tell you this is the exact weight you should use today. So your plan was 185, but today you should use 192 and a half because you can.
Yep.
Or, hey, we're going to back that off because there's a lot of other stresses in your life right now. This major project you're working on is really taking a toll on you, you know, and so you're not pushing it that much. So that's VBT. Now people have to do all the calculations. I've simplified it so it just tells you what weight to put on the bar now. But the jerk metric is a whole nother level. I've seen some discussions around it. They've been very minimal, and no one's using it because, well, the technology isn't there, but it is. I mean, we have the technology right now. It's just not being used. So the jerk metric is a physics. It's a physics calculation. So it's the rate of change of acceleration. So acceleration would be the zero point 0.3 meters per second. And that's what I would then use to go, okay, it's 192 instead of 185 today.
Yep.
Okay. But the rate of change is finding this jerkiness in the movement. What's that jerkiness of the movement? That jerkiness of the movement is the start of the breakdown of an over moving muscle.
Yep.
So it's going straight to when we're doing that, because it might not be another set until we start the velocities breaking down, or it, you're looking at two different things. So right now it's the earliest time. So the jerk metric is absolutely fascinating. We're using the jerk metric in our calculations with many others to manage someone's training. That is freaking cool. We're going straight there.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Um, and it, it segues so well into where I want to go with this interview. Um, I'll broad brushstrokes it or paraphrase it. Meathead who lifts big weight, a thousand pounds plus, is actually a mad scientist, and knows so much. But what I want to get out of
Yeah,
you towards
that's
the end of the
I
show.
didn't make up that name. You can guess why I was given given that name in the industry a
Again,
long time because
um,
I've
uh,
been
to,
I've been
towards the end of the show,
yeah,
I'm gonna get you to actually distill all that down. But you spoke about that app. We talked about it offline at the start. Beta testing in 2 days from now. People listening, what is that app, and how can they get it?
yeah. Lift Lab is the app. And you can find it if you don't if you look for that. It's on Instagram and a few of the other socials, and then there's Lift Lab app is the website, but you can also just look for me and you'll be able to find it linked through on that. So really cool, an incredible team working on this. So the sports science would just like fill this wall with calculations behind us, and then some some innovative IP on how we're actually measuring and tagging that velocity as well. That's been developed for years, and that's yeah, we're the only company that is doing that to date. And then combining that with the AI pose estimation, some really cool stuff.
It's so exciting to hear a scientist. I've had yourself, so a lifter scientist, had Professor Scott Stevenson. He was the first professor of bodybuilding that I had on. Uh,
Scott's great.
yeah, he's what a guy. Professor Bill Campbell, all these guys, but what they're doing now is they're 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 moving on to apps. You got people like Lane Norton with his diet app. You got Dr. Mike Israetel with his training app, but yours is way ahead for the personalization. But what I love as a 51-year-old lifter who's been lifting for 38 years is it's it's specific to me injury wise, injury prevention, which I call prehab or being able to get ahead of that curve.
Yep. Yeah, and I hate to just sell it as like that because it's like, oh, the 25-year-old's gonna go, I don't need that. I'm not gonna injure myself. But it's performance optimization. Like that is
Exactly.
literally what's in there is what I did with a team of coaches for those decades that I was chasing those big goals. Like it was manual and we didn't have the tools. I had a tether to the bar
Yep.
measuring the velocity. Like we would meet after it, review the data. Like we would look at laser my alignment and check that and then develop the movement plan off of it. Like
Yep.
when I say a wall of stuff behind it, like I've literally been working on this for a long time because we're
Yeah.
pulling all of that into this with that technology. And that's what's cool about this, the hyper individualization of it. You can choose your goal, whether it's strength, hypertrophy, endurance, a mixture of those, but whatever you choose is going to be absolutely 100%. You're the only person on that program in the world because it's self-refining to you. And then that's where we're using AI to actually insert variables because the program can tell and see how you're responding and cut out the pieces that aren't working and just focus in on the things that do. And so as we insert those variables, we'll get a better and more refined picture. It just keeps getting, and it knows exactly your stress and your adaptation. So I'm super excited about it because everybody's focused on these kind of things that can scale or sell to a coaching service that can then manage or input their training plan, where this is hyper individualization. And yeah, I know for a fact no one is doing anything like what we're doing.
I'm very excited, and I said
Yeah, I
sort of
sound like a salesman, but I'm just like excited. I'm just excited talking about what
You're
it
not,
is.
and again, humility. All the guests are the same. You're not a salesman. You're passionate about what you do. Going back again to what I was saying 15 minutes ago, I'd have to pay Paul Check, I think, $1,000 a training session to get anything like that. And when you were saying about how you had learned to expand your diaphragm, tighten up that core 360 degrees, I was thinking to myself, hey, we're online here. Do you teach that online? How do people that are listening go
Yeah.
and get some of Chris's skills they can transfer to their body? You've got the app. Do you also coach online? Do you have other things that help, or is it just the app that's going to be able to do that for you with the
Yeah.
explanations?
So the deep dive on like coursework. So the in the app, there's videos on how to do everything, right?
Great.
But a deep dive on like those specific things, that there's hours of lecture and, assessment videos, and then how do you walk through this? Like that course, the principles of loaded movement course, as I call it, which is that fundamental piece, is a 4 day, you know, piece of, education.
Yep.
And anyway, I've got that and literally thousands of hours of videos breaking this down. So there may be some of those smaller videos on here, but I do have, if you go to chrisduffin.com, I have a website that's completely free. But that's to get you in. So it is actually, the free resource is incredible. I've got tons of articles on training, peptides, supplements, and then I've got a bunch of the movement videos that'll probably keep you busy for months, if not longer, diving through that. But $29 a month is you get the full meal deal. And I've got lectures in there and entire courses from a bunch of leading folks. We mentioned some, Dr. Craig Liebenson, Dr. Charlie Weinroth, Dr. Stuart McGill. I think Lane Norton's in there. Uh, you name it, I
Brilliant.
have them in there. Thousands of hours. I mean, tens of thousands of dollars worth of courses are there at your access, which I don't worry about somebody like getting it and trying to consume it and checking out in a month, because you could spend 2 years trying to go through all the content there and it wouldn't. So I have it all indexed. Just go to chrisduffin.com. You can check it out for free. I've got a trial membership to the insiders too. But this is, I don't know where there's anything more comprehensive in the industry. And certainly, absolutely, there is nowhere that has that value for that price. I mean, not even close.
I'm excited, and I'm glad that managed to bring this to the listeners and the viewers. I want to go back a stage, and then we'll go through the cutting through the weeds with the training knowledge you have. Inventions. You invented a bunch of things, which is amazing. My personal experience, I'm old school. I'm as old school as it comes, and even though we're supposed to innovate in the special forces and in this new world, you still got your trained experience. I was lucky enough to uh, get introduced to Andrew Harvot from Advanced Muscle Mechanics. Nice guy, and he's invented this thing called the launch pad. And for the listeners, it's something you put on your bench press. But what it did for me, after all these years of lifting, it put my shoulders in the right position without popping a costovertebral joint, without getting some tweaks through my spine. And it's just going along with what you're saying, you get the right piece of equipment designed from scratch rather than that flat bench press, that flat bar, that big deadlift bar. It really does work well, and these innovations that are around these days are brilliant.
Yeah, no, it's the resource is incredible. I think it comes down to these days being able to filter that, like filter what is of value, and hopefully I'm presenting that. I know one thing I am proud of is the respect that I have in the industry for what I've done. Like I don't have this giant millions of followers or any of that stuff, but the people that do follow are the cream of the crop as far as like anybody in the industry. They go they stand behind what I do, want to be part of that and promote it because it's well, and that should be asked, based on my customer base that I listed or some sampling of it. But yeah, I sound like I don't know. Move on.
Hey, the last thing we didn't touch on, and again, you were so quick through it, was your invention for the White House. What the hell is that?
Oh, they're using a company I co-founded was a flywheel product. So
Oh, wow.
I'm a big proponent of flywheel training. So I co-founded this company called Kratos Fly Fitness, and I'm still involved. You should be able to see their products on my website. So I'm relaunching a store on my website with the things that I'm involved with. So all the barefoot shoes, the Build Fast formula, another company that I helped get off the ground, the the breath belt, absolutely phenomenal. And Kratos, so Kratos is a flywheel product, which is everything that you put into it, it cuts back. So for your tactical populations, this could be really cool because it's something that is more like natural movement. So it's the difference between doing a cable chest press and doing a punch. It's very
Right.
dynamic and responsive.
Yeah.
So it's the difference between doing a calf raise and doing a jump. It's something that you could load like a stand up in wrestling or a takedown, things like that. So everything that you put into it, it puts right back into you, and it's really cool. It has a lot of research around strength and hypertrophy, but the tendon stiffness actually really beats out traditional strength training weight methods. So it's used a lot in clinical settings, but the sports performance, the speed strength is just that's where it's at. So when I talk about the punch, like this is something you could strike with, for example. It's really amazing. And you can mimic, any movement you want with it. So it's this one was patented because it's one flywheel that you can mount to any position on the floor or up the wall. So you can do any, vertical or horizontal movements, squatting versus, standing press,
Yep.
for example. And what's cool about the flywheel, it has there's no rest periods with it because it's immediate. So like again, the punch goes right, like you're immediately on the pullback, right? So it is very dynamic, and you can use it in a fashion then to also ramp up the metabolic side of your training because it's just there's no break to it. And then the load is also variable based on how much you put into it. So you can start supersetting things together because you've got a broad range of weight. So I could do, side delts and then curls and then, my lats without ever stopping. So doing a giant set. So I
Brilliant.
like to use it for I call it metabolic strength training, where I'm doing a giant set of maybe 4 exercises and it's nonstop for like I just don't stop like doing work for like 15 minutes
And that's
because
exactly
it's
what we used to, that's how we used to train in the unit. We used to call it death by circuit, and then they called it CrossFit. But that's how we do work. It's not, we don't go and lift one set. We need to go out there and perform.
so as your strength goes down, the resistance goes down because you're putting less into it. So, and again, or the exercise difference. So if you're going to do giant sets like that, circuits,
Mm.
it's the absolute best. And so I can't speak to the trainer that was working with, the president and chief. I wish they had more effect on, helping him with his health and cognition, but I think that those were the goals with having that there.
What a great.
Not sure if those were met. I don't want to get into politics, but
Thank you for going through that. Again, I try and listen to a guest as an interviewer from the listener's point of view, and you've always got those questions. So that's brilliant. We went through that. You talked about you inferred almost that there's too much out there in the way of exercise gimmicks, in the way of exercise machines, and that's where I wanted to go with you because you are so educated. You've done so many diverse things, and you know so much. I wanted to try and distill it down, and I've got 3 questions to try and get that out of you. But first off, let's start with the third question, which was myths, because that's where we sort of left off before. What are some of the biggest myths that you found in the strength and we'll say hypertrophy, but we'll translate to bodybuilding side of the things? What are some of the biggest myths you've seen in the industry lately that you'd like to dispel?
yeah. I think one of the myths that's been starting to take some hits is that eccentric training is the be all and end all for hypertrophy. And we're starting to see that the data and the studies on that were very biased for eccentric training. And
Mm,
so I'm not saying that eccentric training is bad. I'm a big proponent, and flywheels are actually heavy eccentric based. But a mixture of all, like, I think we get so caught up in trying to find like this perfect, what's the piece out of this that we can extract instead of
yes.
sticking with these fundamental things. So that's why like my product designs and everything have always been around really base, like yeah, I'm getting the spine in the right position, and I'm teaching people to squat. Like, so I'm not like got some fancy vibration trainer or some other thing that's supposed to do super secret science. I'm literally sticking with the basics, but reinventing the basics as it
Yeah,
relates
starting
to that.
a better starting point with them.
Yeah. And that's hard. Like it's way easier to come up with gimmicks than like reinvent something that everybody's known for, 100 years.
Oh, it is because you got so much belief, and belief is and
Yeah.
belief and ego is such a thing to get through. That's what I find in my current world of self-defense, belief and ego. I mean, telling a BJJ guy his stuff doesn't work when there's five guys with and someone got blades, they don't want to hear that. Um, but
Yeah, you always want to hear it's yeah. I'm sure that you hear that.
um, thank you with that myth, and then you went on to touch on the basics, and that's where I wanted um, uh, to go on to now is what are the low-hanging fruits? What are the fundamentals? That's the word you used. For someone listening here, what are the fundamentals that get you strong, get you size, and get you health and injury free? How should someone? I mean, I actually think I know the answer because I've been talking to you, and it's go get the app, which is brilliant. But what are the fundamentals that someone should focus on rather than, oh, I need to get some creatine, I need to do some cold exposure, and is it sauna? Because there's so much out there, and there's
Oh,
so
it
much
is. And,
information
and
flowing in.
man, there's tons of research around sauna, and I've got one, and we're always looking for those fancy things,
Hmm.
right? You need sleep. And most everyone does not get enough. They're waking up early to get that workout in. They're compromising it in some fashion or another. Look, that's why I wear the Aura ring. So I don't care attention, what it tells me I should be doing for the day, but what are the behaviors that are impacting the quality of my sleep?
Hmm.
Don't let the score mess with you. I woke up, oh, says I've got a bad day of sleep. What do I do? It's just like gonna like that's already done. Ignore that, but evaluate those behaviors. Uh, are you getting a good, well-rounded diet? You
Yes.
know, we love to focus on all these. I could go on a tangent about, that's where I think there's so much misinformation around the types of food. These ones are bad for you. This is the secret diet, so on. At the end of the day, a diverse diet of whole foods is going to be net positive. There's a massive amount of research demonstrating that has the greatest impact on longevity in life. Like, hey, yeah, if you've got an autoimmune disease, like maybe you want to do an elimination diet, but that does not mean it's the best diet or for everyone, or certainly not for performance. We can argue all these specialty diets. I think I'll defer to Lane Norton. He's got some really good pieces on that.
He does.
But whole foods, making sure that you have enough, because that's going to cover your micronutrients. It's going to cover all the aspects that you need because that is that's good. Making sure you've got exposure to the sun.
Yep.
These are some basic pieces that you need to have. Now, when it comes to training, there's no secret program other than my app, of course. But at the end of the day, it's whatever's going to work for your lifestyle and that you feel is good. If you love stretching and yoga and that's going to keep you going, do it. Whatever's going to get you to move your body at least 10 minutes a day. If it's walking, if it's running, if it's sprinting, if it's swimming, I don't care. But it should have some form of resistance to it. The number one hack to longevity is having some muscle on your frame. Does it mean being like me? No. But that's why I said some form of resistance to it and something that brings you joy and that you can be a part of your life. And it's not a period of time to get in shape. This is not about shape. Your quality of life and your total length of life are going to be most influenced by the amount of muscle on your frame. plain and simple. So those are some fundamental pieces. Now, when it comes to movement, the largest global impact on your body, instead of getting caught up in like this super secret elbow drill and this rehab, is do I have enough dorsiflexion? Number one biggest global impact on everything else in the quality of movement is going to be the ability to control and manage spinal position. Number
Beautiful.
two behind that is going to be foot and ankle mechanics. Okay. Don't get caught up in all the other stuff. You got two areas that generate a lot of power. That's your shoulder complex and your hip complex. Don't start looking at those until you have those first two things managed. If you've got pain, things developing, look at movement quality as it relates to those things and look at the amount of loading that you're doing. Most of what you can do can be tracked back to how much loading that you're doing. So, load management is king when it comes to injury prevention and also adding mass. So it's always going to be somewhere in there, making sure that we've got what are those things?
Hmm.
We've got sleep, we've got nutrition, we've got some sun, right? And now we've got loading. If we're loading too much, we're going to have an issue with potential injury. If we're loading too little, we're not going to have enough muscle mass on our frame. Yeah, I
That's
that's
that's brilliant.
that's
Absolutely
that's
brilliant.
that's it. Yeah.
Listeners, please just go back, rewind 2 minutes, and listen to that. And I say that because as you're saying it, Chris, I was translating. You went sleep, diet, sun, movement. Paul Check, who we mentioned, Dr. Diet, Dr. Quiet, Dr. Movement, and Dr. Happiness, same sort of thing. Um, Dr. Gabriel Lyon, an actual doctor, not Paul, who's a great guy. She was just saying yesterday the single biggest predictor of longevity is how much muscle you have in your body. Dr. Gabriel Lyon, tiny little 5 foot something woman who lives. She's not a world record power lifter like yourself, Chris. Um, uh, just brilliant things that everybody concurs on. Everyone concurs on there in that scientific world. And then I loved what you said about spine and foot, because those are the two um, factors that produce force forward, upward, all the different places. And those are the two biggest sort of injury places, the low back pain, obviously, and foot pain. So
Well, and
perfectly
most
done.
everything in between there, whether it's a knee or hip or whatever issue, is a output. Like those, I listed those in the impact of global. Yeah, I listed those in the order of global impact. And if
Yes,
we get back to load management, when I'm talking about movement quality, the amount that if we improve movement quality, it improves our tolerance for load.
of
So it's
course.
impacting still load management at the end of the day.
When I was in the rehab world, I used to say, "Hey, this joint runs on axis, not on axes. Wear this thing out." So you're talking about a different terminology saying the same thing. We want to manage the load on those joints and on the rest of the body and have it stacked, like you said right at the start, stacked in the right place.
Yep.
Um, Now you touched on your. Actually, I've lost track there. So there's a couple of bits of editing I've got to do in this show, which is very, very rare. Okay, I got it. Barefoot. You've said
Yes.
barefoot 3 times. Now, for the listeners, that's not spelt like my feet here, Bare. That's bear as in a grizzly bear. And I've got one of your tabs open, Chris, in preparation for the show. I did my research, but also I'm going to be buying some stuff. Barefoot Inventor. Talk to us about that because I'm intrigued that a power lifter, again, I'm I'm paraphrasing, has gone and designed some kind of amazing footwear. And how would a powerlifter do that?
Yeah. So I started doing a lot of work on foot and ankle mechanics education. Ooh, I'm not sure how long ago, over 10 years ago. And all my lifts, so my deadlift and my squat were actually without shoes. And the reason for that is that gives me the great, connection to the floor and ability to actually develop that foot and ankle complex because if we have any weakness or dysfunction there, we're going to start having some compensations through the body. And as I said, that has the second largest global impact on the body. So if we're standing on a point of weakness and our inability, like it's a structure, I get called out or used to get called out on this a lot going, where's the science? Where's the science? I'm like, where is the science behind saying some part of our body doesn't respond like the rest of it? That if we don't use it, we lose it.
Yeah.
That if we, you know, if you package it, if you package something up and don't just get out and use it, am I saying to go barefoot all the time? No, but you need to use your foot and ankle complex to develop the strength and the musculature and the mobility and all these, and to clear toxins, to get like just like every other part of your body. There's absolutely nothing special. Now, I could dive into the search, into the science around this, the meta-analysis on orthotics, and show you that all all orthotics do is provide a temporary relief over a 6 to 8 week period of time, and anything beyond that add zero value. But what is it doing? If it's teaching you to have passive reliance on something for support, well, then it's actually making you weaker. And
Yes.
what does being weaker cause long term? I mean, this is really basic. So actually, I'm gonna go on a rant here for a little bit because they are doing research now. Because I used to not be able to say, I'm like, this is just theory, but this is human physiology. Like, argue with me. But now MRIs, ultrasounds, and biopsies of the foot show that 98% of all plantar fasciitis cases are not overuse. They are underuse, showing atrophy and related tendinopathy from lack of use. Now, I'm not
Wow.
saying, hey, if you've got tendonitis, go like just start using your foot all the time. Well, it's weak. You need some sort of like you have to build into it like anything else. You have to start developing the strength and resilience of those structures. But nearly every single case of overuse is not the case. That's atrophy and tendinopathy, right? Let alone the impact that that starts having on the ankle or on the knee, the hip, the back, as it relates to posture, function, and use when that isn't working properly. That statistic should be mind blowing for
98%
people.
is. It really is.
It is. So, um, so yeah, I started doing this long before that research was available because it seemed really basic to me to understand the concepts around physiology. And for the longest time, people were like, "Well, I can't wear shoes. I can't go shoeless in my gym. What do I do?" And I didn't have any shoes to recommend because I just didn't really none of the minimalist shoes I felt were adequate, and none that I would recommend. And so finally, ended up just developing my own. And so it's with some partners, we launched this company called Barefoot, which is also tied off of a little bit of my upbringing, which we didn't get into this, but I grew up homeless in the wilderness. Yes, I had bears attack my tents and be chased by them and so on. It's a long
Wow.
story involving murderers, a serial killer, human trafficking. It's a bestseller. You can find it on Audible, Amazon, so on. Um, so thus the name Bear and the play on that. Now, um, we're also using a different approach than other companies, and everybody's focusing on synthetics, which I think that there's problems with microplastics and supply chain and all
Yes.
this, when leather is an incredible material when it comes to comfort, warmth, being able to moisture. Leather is unbeatable. So we use suede, leather, canvas, using natural materials, make the best shoe that allows you to use and develop your foot. So again, if you start going this route, you want to build into it. Don't just go, hey, I'm going to put these on and run 20 miles a day because I run 20 miles a day. It'd be just like, hey, I've never benched before. I'm going to start building into it. I'm not just going to walk in, put 225 on the bar and try to do 50 reps every day, right? So, use them for 20% of the time for a few weeks and then keep advancing it.
Yeah.
Now, the research is showing that wearing a minimalist style shoe, a barefoot style shoe, is going to do as much for your foot and ankle as a dedicated foot and ankle strengthening program. Now, I still recommend that you do both, right? And that's simple. Like it means doing things like maybe some calf raises with a minimalist shoe or barefoot,
Yeah.
doing some single leg work, doing some single leg work with the front half of your foot off of a block, so on. Right? Super easy. It's not extra work. It's just the same work done differently. So you're actually stretching and strengthening and learn to actively control and use those structures, just like every other part of the body. So yeah, I think I went through that pretty quick.
But really
But
well as well. Thank you, Chris. I'm excited. I actually did barefoot running after I left the unit because of an injury. I started at 15-second runs. I was lucky enough to have barefoot Ted McDonald, who ran with Chris McDougall in the with the Tarahumara Indians years ago, who started that sort of I was going to use the word craze, but now it's backed up by science. And he was on the show a while back, which is beautiful. But I love that you've got shoes there that do it. You said, you used to
yeah,
go out
we have some special force units, Green Berets, because they can buy what they want that are using our shoes and boots in their operations. So another tie-in, by the way, that you probably weren't aware
absolutely.
of.
Special like we started with John. Special forces guys. We're not silly. We need to know what works, and when we find it, we make it happen. Um, yeah, absolutely brilliant. I'm excited to get those, and I'm super excited to get the app and go through your training. Um, just the personalization of it and the explanation of it, it just sounds absolutely brilliant. You mentioned your book, which is great because I wanted to touch just on that for the listeners. I wanted this show to focus on what can someone do for the basics. Let's cut through the drinking from a fire hose, and you did that so well. And then you went the other way with the app. This is a simple, user-friendly way to get all the knowledge and experience you've done. But your book, your story, is absolutely phenomenal. And I knew we wouldn't be able to cover all of it in the show. So I do encourage listeners to go to the show notes, click the link, and listen to your book. It's going to be my next audio book as well because your story is amazing, and like so many guests. So thank you for mentioning that. You did say it before, but the name of your best-selling book is
The Eagle and the Dragon.
brilliant.
But you just look for Chris Duffin, you'll probably find it. It was a bestseller in psychology, personal development, philosophy. Yeah, I don't know. There was like 8 categories actually, but those are the ones that came off the top of my head.
I'm excited.
It's an
Look,
interesting. So it's not a it's I use my story to share lessons and thought processes to help people. So it's a story to articulate those
yep.
versus, oh, here's my story. It's written for the reader, and check out the reviews. I think they speak well to that.
Thank you. Um, I've covered the things I want to do, but just one idea I had to finish off as a simple question is, you've got all this knowledge, um, all your experience and things in training. What advice would you give your younger self at the start when you started lifting, knowing what you know now? What would you give advice would you give to your younger self to focus on more that you didn't maybe back in the day?
Oh man, that's a tough one
Yeah.
because the information wasn't there. And I used to kind of beat myself up for not finding a mentor or seeking that out. But there was no one to turn to. It was,
Mm.
it was a different time. I mean, I started lifting weights in the 80s.
Yep. Same.
So
Same.
yeah. So that's tough. So it can't really be around that side of it. So it's got to be kind of on the mental approach. And I guess it would be to take your time,
Wow.
to
Yes.
understand that this is something that's going to be with you a lifetime and there's never a time to rush it. Now, that would probably lead to less injuries and things that I deal with today, which would put me in a way better position, have achieved greater goals. But at the same time, that might end the path of me having to do the work in the research to discover and develop the methodology. So it's I have trouble having regrets for those reasons, even though they're, major negative impacts on my life. The net positive is where I'm at today and what I do. So it's That's a tough one, right?
It's good advice though, and I wanted to get that for people. And take your time is clever. I'm much smarter on my training. Not saying I'm smart, but my training smarter because I don't try and rush. And I often think of a quote from my friend Pat McNamara, another Delta Force guy. It's called "Exercise, not injure-size," which has taken a lot of years to beat out of myself.
Same here. Pat's an amazing guy. I've had him on my podcast, I think a couple times.
What a small world. I'm sure we've got many more people that we could talk about. Chris, thank you. I wanted to do that succinctly with your information. I think we've managed to nail that. It's been phenomenal having you on and chatting, and I really appreciate you taking the time to make this show happen straight away. Um, I'll pull out some shorts quickly so that people can access your app uh, when the beta testing does start. But it's just been amazing chatting to you, amazing learning, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, no, thank you. Great questions. I really love this.
Oh, now just one last thing. It's narrated show notes at the start, like I said, but you've mentioned a few times that people listening to this part of the show, where's the simplest place to find more about you?
You go use that fancy search engine or social media and you type in Chris Duffin. It's like muffin, but with a D, Duffin. I'm pretty easy to find. ChrisDuffin.com or mad_scientist_Duffin on most of the social medias.
And there's some great images that come up. You got some phenomenal photos and knowledge. Awesome. Well, I hit pause. We'll have a quick chat.
Hi, thanks for watching. I'm Damien Porter, former New Zealand Special Forces operator and former Australian police officer, and your podcast host. Please check out my new project at hownottodieguy.com, where I teach everything you need to know to both males and females, at-risk populations, schools, kids, and the elderly for self-defense, situational awareness, and all-round skills that every good person should know. Thanks for watching.